Welcome to the Modern Pet Retailer, where independent pet retailers come together to run better businesses, make smarter decisions, and stop leaving money on the table.
Welcome, everybody, to the Modern Pet Retailer. Thanks so much for being here. I've got Dave Braxton that's going to help us with this topic today. Last week, we talked about how to build SOPs with inside your business. And this week, we're going to go one level deeper. We're not talking about just documenting. We're talking about how to evaluate your processes you probably already have in place so that you can get to the bottom of if you're losing money, whether it's time, actual physical dollars, or energy inside your business. Dave has a specific framework he uses to evaluate and improve processes inside his own business. And today we're going to talk to him about how he improved his warehouse operations so that he could save time, money, energy, and headache at the end of the day. So while we're talking today, I want you to kind of think about, and while we're discussing this, I want you to think about one process inside your business that you think could run more efficiently. I think when Dave hits some of these talking points, you're going to be thinking, the way that we ring people out could possibly be improved. There's something that you're like settling with. We're going to talk about how you don't have to settle with the way that you work through some of these processes and the SOPs that you're building and actually improve them. So we're going to dive into the framework that Dave uses and how to think about improving these processes. Dave, you follow a very specific method. When you approach improving a process inside a business, can you walk us through the framework that you like to use before you even start changing anything?
Yeah, and just take a step back, when you're looking at systems in your business, there are, eh, as the operator, as the individual, the owner, the manager, whoever's going to take control of these systems, you have to have both an objective overview. So you have to have a high level objective outside view, and you also have to have enough detail to understand the process. And we have to use both of these views in order to improve our systems. We can't go in entirely cold where we don't understand the detail of the job. And we also can't just look at a minute task to try to improve it. We have to understand the whole system. So just to understand that when we talk about these things today, we need to have both those views sort of paradoxically held at the same time. And we can view them one at a time and switch back and forth in order to get the best here. But sort of the process is we accumulate, it's just like most of us do, is like, hey, the closet gets full of stuff. The car has a few extra things in it. The computer hard drive, we just keep save it because we decide to save it. Our systems and processes accumulate these things over time that we probably don't need. So one of the major first steps to look at is, what are we doing today that we probably don't have to do? That's really the crux of the whole thing, is reduce and simplify. And you do this by eliminating those steps, those things that we're doing today in our processes that we no longer need or have very low impact or very rare occurrence. So that's my first step is, one, make sure you understand the process from a global level as well as a moderately detailed level. As you review the process, do your best to take away any ideas, thoughts, steps, parts of the process that used to be relevant and useful, but have become very little use or not. So that's where I start.
So after we evaluate kind of what we can probably eliminate for a surface level, what's the second step you take in this process?
Right. If we want to be able to streamline and optimize what's left. So we've gone through the process of looking at everything in detail, questioning what we're doing, whether we need it or not. We've done our best to eliminate those things that we no longer need or have very little usefulness. Only then can we begin to look at what's the best sequence. How do we optimize these steps? How do we make it easier? And Tiff, you and I have talked about this on other calls, where can we take a process that used to be done by one person and share it with, make it easier to teach, make it easier to do so that you can share it with more staff members. And that gives us stronger bench, but it also gives us, we refine the systems in such a way that more people can do the job more easily. So this optimization step and the simplification step really does more than just enhance the process itself. It gives us the tools to delegate to a larger number of people.
Yeah, and I think if you start bringing other employees in on these processes you're trying to improve and they still ask the question of, wait, why do we touch this product twice or anything like that, you can still find that waste at like step one that you might not need and you just didn't, you overlooked it at the time, or it's still not streamlined enough. But it has been very nice to go from one warehouse employee to having our entire front staff pretty much capable of doing the warehouse receiving. So that's not, again, key man risk and relying on one person or relying on somebody that hasn't done it very often and it's a complicated process. So you have to bring them in and train them the same day you need them to receive product.
You make a really good point. Like there's two sides to the novice or the person that hasn't done it or doesn't do it too often. They can make recommendations, and because they don't do it enough or don't do it often enough or they've never seen it, is they might make recommendations that are not relevant. They might say, "Hey, why are you doing this?" But ultimately, it's an important step. Uh, but that's a really good point. Is because they're outside of the system itself, they have an outsider's view and can bring up really good points if you encourage them to participate in that part of the step. Hey, why are we doing this? You shouldn't just be like, wave them off and say, oh, we do it because blah, blah, blah. Let's do it because we need it. We do it because we've always done it. That's the wrong approach. Is whether they're right or wrong is irrelevant. You should pause to really ask yourself, and this is going back to kind of the step one, is ask yourself, is this something we really need?
So we've removed things we don't need anymore. We've streamlined and optimized what was left and simplified the process. What's kind of your next step in all of this?
Well, there's still kind of like two more steps. We can also question the speed of things. So we can speed things up. And in our sort of example that I think we're going to use today, because it's such an incredible example, it's the way we did our warehouse, is we use the system as prescribed. Our point of sale system has a remote scanner, worked really well. And part of the problem there is it was embedded with two or three steps that we couldn't remove. And we changed the way that we check in. And I don't know what the number is. We 10x'd our speed on that one tiny step, because instead of scan, click, 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 we were just like, bam, 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 bam. We used a type of scanner that didn't stop to ask those questions. When we look at, we can go faster and you can almost go as fast as go as fast until you break something and then take it back a notch. Hey, so of the last step, I would kind of combining like speed we don't want to demand that our employees and our receiving just run so fast that they're burning themselves out, that they can't do the job well, that they're hurting themselves. These are risk factors that are outside of this. But more often than not, we can speed things up and then we can learn where the breaking point is without hurting our employees, without hurting our process, without hurting our products. We're not just throwing stuff around, but we're speeding things up. But really the last step that we're looking to do is automation and using the software systems that we are accustomed to, our point of sale, maybe your Excel spreadsheet or your Google Sheets, whatever you're using there. And, email, because we use email to communicate with the vendors. We've removed all the steps we can possibly remove. Now the question becomes, how much of this total process can we automate? And the automation can, again, take percentages of time off of our process system. We use automation to go from inventory inbound tracking to sending an email to our vendors to tell them if there were problems with the receive. And one, it's part of the simplification. Two, the automation reduces the training and the need for the employee to remember or forget something. So automation is the final step once we've done all of these other steps.
Yeah. Something that you always say, and it's probably going to always stick with me because it wasn't a mindset I had before I knew you, was spend 2 hours to save 15 minutes over and over and over again. And I know I struggle with that because when I'm sitting and working on something, trying to improve it for a long period of time, it's hard to see the ROI on that. But if you gain back 5 minutes each time you repeat the step, it will pay off eventually. So that's something with the automation is like just huge. And it's very hard to fathom exactly all the time you put in up front, what it can save you on the back end.
I would say it tongue in cheek, but it is absolutely valid. I mean, it's sort of part of my personality. Yeah, I'll spend times because I like tinkering, I like improving, I like focusing on details, but it has a really valid long-term impact. And that is just that, right? If you have to figure out how to do an email automation and it does take you 2 hours, well, this is a step that you're receiving product. I mean, Tiff, what do we deal with? Like 10 weekly vendors, give or take. And that's times 52 times we've been in business 88 years, like when you start to leverage that multiple across each time over and over and over and over again. The other thing is it reduces error, right? So if we can reduce steps, increase speed, reduce training, and then also reduce the likelihood of error, like this is incredible compound effect that makes everything better. And we've seen that with many of the systems that we've implemented over time. But yeah, that's funny. I do say it tongue in cheek, but it is absolutely valid. Is like, I would absolutely sit down and spend too much time, but I know that it pays off over the days and weeks that follow.
So you kind of started off by talking about how to have a viewpoint of these issues and these processes, the objective overview and the detailed overview. And I know for myself, it's difficult for me to step back and figure out where the problem might be. So how do you get yourself outside the process enough to ask the question when you're either the one that built it or you're close to the person that built it?
That's a really good question. What we talked about last week about setting systems up and asking people to help you develop the system, let them write the SOPs and let them participate in the whole process development is we've learned over many years how things seem to work. And then we embed them in our subconscious and then we try to forget them and we become good at what we do. But we have to be prompted or we have to intentionally prompt ourselves to stop and step back. And even that language, like step back, you can take it both figuratively and literally. What you can do is teach someone else to do the job that you're reviewing and watch them do it. So one of two things occurs. If you are the primary operator in a particular sequence of tasks, process, then you're going to forget most of what you're doing. It's going to be very, very difficult to be objective because you're doing it in the way that feels most comfortable yourself because you've trained yourself to do it that way. So it's not a bad idea. If you can self-reflect, you might be able to do it yourself, but you're probably still going to miss some stuff. So I think the best way to do it is to teach someone else and be very open to the questions that they will ask and write them down even because if you're teaching someone for 15 minutes or half an hour, you're going to forget the stuff that they ask. So it would be a great idea to write down, why do we do it this way? What's this step for? How important is this? So we can review those later and actually ask ourselves the deeper question. But literally, if we are standing outside of the system, if we watch someone else do it and we can stop ourselves from being over their shoulder and going, no, 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 that button. No, 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 do this that way. Literally step back and allow them to run the process on their own. And it might take 2 or 3 iterations for them to kind of get comfortable enough to do the system. And then when you watch them do it, you are literally objective. You're literally outside. So if you can do it mentally, that's often faster. Or if you're not the primary operator, if someone else in your business has been doing this for a while, this is another thing. Now they teach you or you objectively stand back and watch them do it. And this is what we ended up doing in our store in many of the jobs that had been delegated to different people. Set it and forget it. They're doing the job fine. I'm not really paying attention to it. So, I'm happy with the way that it's going, but it's not until I sit next to them and watch them do it and explain the steps where I can actually go, oh, this seems ridiculous. You know, whether I had originally created the system in that way or whether they modified the system themselves, I had forgotten about it. So it took that sort of like renewal of engagement in the process in order for me to be able to begin to question the process. Right. So that's kind of like, I think that's pretty much it. If you're the operator, teach somebody else, then watch. And if you're not the primary operator, have them teach you and sort of like watch the system. That will help you become objective by literally standing outside of the process. I think that's the easiest way to approach it. Later, cultivating that objectivity so that you can watch yourself do the process. But that's a longer game and much more difficult to do.
So I asked everyone at the beginning to think as we're walk through this framework, what possibly within your business might be the bottleneck and causing these problems and what actually might be broken. Dave, how do you identify where a bottleneck actually is versus just where it feels painful?
Pain is a good indicator, but I think if you're going to sort of 80-20 this, where you're going to look for the highest ROI first, I think you're going to look for a few different indicators, simply those processes that are done most often. Right? Inherently, it's going to be a solid ROI because if you can shave 5 minutes off of something that you do multiple times a week, that's going to add up really, really quick. So that's definitely one area to begin to look. Again, pain can be an indicator. So you lose an employee or something that causes a need for you to refresh a system right away. Obviously, there's an urgency there that can't be avoided. So you need to jump in, you'll need to learn how to do it. Then you can start to like question the way you're doing it. But if you're not in pain right now, we look at those things that are done most often, and that will give you a fast ROI. We also look at things that have a higher potential for um, sort of outside costs, those things that have a compounding effect. When one error occurs or one slowdown occurs, that might cause shelf stock outages, bad customer service, inventory discrepancies. So anything that might create safety issue, right? Like if things are not done properly, then we might cause a safety issue. Any of things that cause a compounding effect are also really valuable to look at because those are almost hidden costs. We have to think about it for a moment to understand how that cascading effect of something happened at point A, but that affects B, C, D, E, and all of these steps that are breaking down have costs to them of some cost. So those two things I think are the areas that I would look first to look at bottlenecks or broken systems that should be reviewed.
A couple of examples, like you said, if you lose an employee, it could have been that key man employee that you had built around that process. If you lose that person, you're going to feel that pain pretty quickly that you're like,
Yeah.
okay, nobody knows
Yeah.
how to do this, or they don't know how to do it well coming behind them. Outside factors. I don't think anybody could anticipated what COVID did, but that's what when we get into the warehouse story, what kind of caused a pain point there, or it could be a new business moving in near you. That's a competitor. Things that just cause strain on your business. You have to improve the processes to either keep up, keep your prices low, or however you're going to navigate that new relationship. Or it could just be increased sales, like you're picking up business, you're increasing everything, and now you have product flying out the door like you're not used to. So you might have to look at something to figure out what might be causing that bottleneck. So yeah, definitely a couple examples. So Dave, what are some signals that someone should be watching for that could tell them a process needs to be evaluated? Because I think a lot of people, and I know that we're definitely guilty of it, it's like you said, we set it and forget it, normalize dysfunction, and just accept that things are working, even though they might not be working well.
So we kind of alluded to it is like the key man risk. Um, Anything that's done within the business that relies either completely or mostly on one person. And this, we had talked about this in the past too, is, proprietary knowledge versus institutional knowledge. So anything that one person contains the process in their head and it's not written down or it's not easily transferable, this is a huge risk and should be, systematically addressed over time. You're going to start to look at things and you're like, oh, this is a problem. This is a problem. This is a problem. This is a problem. Um, but you can't do them all at once. And this is where the prioritization is. Like, you can look at prioritization either as improvement in process, that could be speed and cost, or you can look at it as risk. So, what are the probabilities that something's going to occur? So key man loss, it's the old hit by the bus question. We can't plan those things. Um, you might say, oh, well, my manager who does these 5 things, we have a great relationship, they're not likely to leave. Okay. You could consider that moderate to low risk. We can take care of these things slowly over time. But manager gets hit by a bus, spouse moves out of the area and they have to move. There's a lot of reasons why people will change their life very, very short notice. You're exposing yourself to risk that can fundamentally maybe not damage the business, but make it much more difficult to operate. So that's a huge thing, is focusing on those areas where you have single point of failure, where you have high risk of key man risk. So that's one thing. Looking at, if you have a key man and then somebody else steps in, but they can't quite do the job right, if even if it's not de facto one person that does it, if one person does it right and any new person that's added to the system has very, very difficult time learning it, that can be a system that needs improvement, because your teaching, coaching part of the system or the actual process part of the system can be simplified. If we're looking at things that cause errors, right? That we're going with that one is, especially these things can be, maybe you're receiving, often this is the area that we had talked about before, is like those things that happen on such a consistent and regular basis. And if they do cause errors or are unlikely to cause errors, and one of the things that would be great example of this that, honestly, we've tried a variety of fixes and it's just something that is very difficult, is individual unit can sales almost always cause errors. It's like the largest problem, and we've addressed it in multiple different ways, but it's I also believe we don't reduce errors to zero. We just want to get as close to zero as possible. So this is both a good example and a bad example. So the individual can sales, typically at receiving, we do a great job, but at point of sale, it just becomes something that will never go away. We just have to continue to improve the system to reduce the likelihood of error over time. So this is a place where, we must continue to look at a system to how do we have front staff approach individual cans? How do we train them? How do we set up our system to do it better? Anything that we can do to reduce this, because those are the errors that cause the cascading problems.
When we talk about errors, I know that one thing which led back to the warehouse eventually is like, we thought the errors were with a different department or a different section of the business. And when we went upstream essentially and found, you use the can example, our system notifies when a retail staff checks out a can, if it's not in our inventory, it gives you an error. It's like, hey, are you sure you can sell this? We don't have any in stock. And with it being so inconsistent and always off, the staff would never double check themselves because they assumed it was just incorrect, which it was safe to assume that because either it was getting received wrong or sent out the door wrong. And we were able to work that problem from that pain point and go, hey, why are we receiving cans as individuals? Why don't we receive them as cases? Or worked a couple other things in the back end, but it all kind of went upstream towards the warehouse to find out that we could reduce inventory errors by simplifying our systems. So that's just one way that kind of pointed back to not necessarily the exclusive culprit, but definitely something that was not helping the case. So you might, when you think about errors within a process, it might not be in the one that they show up in. It might be upstream or downstream, however you want to look at it. But
Yeah, that's a really good
yeah,
point too. And it's also a good indication exactly what you're saying is the error might not be occurring where you think it's occurring. And looking upstream or downstream can be very valuable. That's an excellent point.
yeah. And I noticed that when we built an SOP for a bath, one of the pain points was the fact that it always was inconsistent depending on who did it. Um, so that can be another trigger to kind of let you know that this might be a spot you want to tackle.
You're right. Anytime you have the key person where um, something doesn't get done or no one in the building can answer the question, this points always back to that key man risk. Like, why does one person have the information? So whenever you got a handful of staff looking at each other going, how do we fix this? And the only person that knows how to fix it is not there. Well, that's a really good indication, whether it's the owner or the manager, and um, they're not in the building. So we have to save it for them or shelve it for them or give them a call. That's a good place to also focus on, because our system should accommodate, both varying parts of our business, but there's a difference between like authority, someone that has to make a decision, um, and ability. Like, why is the owner or manager called if it's something simple? We should always nail those down and take them out.
If you're getting calls on your day off and you're the owner manager, just tackle that thing first because
Yeah,
just for your sanity.
get your
Yeah.
sanity
And
back.
it
Right.
and we talked last week about if you built an SOP and you're still getting a call, either we didn't simplify it enough or the SOP is not clear enough. So we got to look back at it either way. If you find yourself fixing the same problem repeatedly, you are not solving the problem. You are managing the symptom. The process is the problem.
I was just going to say, it's kind of funny. We think our systems, we think to some degree that what we do is complex, but then you think, well, it's not neurosurgery or rocket science, right? So like, if people can do brain surgery and mostly do it well, um, we ought to be able to build a system in our business that takes care of tasks that, we think, oh, we're the best at it. We have to do it. And our employees, you know, whatever, can't do it. They're part-time. They can't do it. They haven't been here long enough. They don't have the experience. They can't do it. Like, come on, we can, we can teach them. We can build a SOP. I actually just heard, I've heard it before, but I didn't realize it was him, Richard Feynman, who is uh, a physicist and has written several books, had a saying, and actually I had attributed it to Einstein, but I heard it attributed to him, is if you cannot explain it simply enough, you do not understand it. So if we do some process that we're having a difficult time delegating, difficult time teaching other people, we're the key person risk that we're setting ourselves up for failure. If we can't simplify it enough to teach someone else how to do it, we really should take time to dig in to make it simple. Um, I think our brains naturally like complexity. It makes us feel like, we are the only person that can do it, that we have a lot of value, but it would be way better and make our business more valuable if we take the time to understand deeply, simplify, and create a written process or a systems type process that we can hand off to other people. Things shouldn't be, our pet retail business is not as complex as other things that people are tackling out there in the world.
The pain point, or you're losing that key man, or the key you notice there's a department process that you have a key man risk. What happens when you ask that person who owns that process to teach you or to explain it to you so that you can work through it and make sure that you can simplify it if need be?
So from the, yeah, talked about this before, it's like the expert's dilemma. Um, when we do something repeatedly and we do it over time and we get good at it, we probably modify steps without recording them. Maybe the modifications make it better. Maybe they were one-off modifications that we needed to do one time. Um, anyway, we build a pattern, right? And as humans, when we build patterns, when we get good at the patterns, we forget about what we're doing. So it just disappears into the background. Um, and it should, if we're really good at something, we shouldn't necessarily have to think about how we're doing it. Therein lies the problem of trying to explain what we're doing and trying to teach someone new, because we've forgotten almost all of the steps, right? If you have a young child like you do, Tiff, and you start to teach them new vocabulary words and grammar and even, how to do things like ride a bike, you can't just say, get on the bike and ride it. Like, but that's where we are as adults. Like, oh, you just, I don't know. You just ride it, right? You steer and you balance and you pedal and everything's good. Yeah. But you forgot to teach them about like how to brake and what is, why do you steer this way? Um, you know, how much effort do you need pedaling? What does balance even mean? So we omit all of these things that we've gotten really good at. That's probably the biggest, the biggest bottleneck of system making and teaching and explaining to new people is we've done it so long, we've done it so well, and we've, created this process and pattern that we just forget almost all the steps. That's probably the biggest difficulty of being able to take the time to break it down step by step. That is, we can expect, a reasonably intelligent employee to understand.
So let's say you lost that key man and you don't have them to reference and build this SOP around. What do you learn when you just attempt a process on your own yourself before without asking anyone for help first?
It's always a learning curve, right? So assuming you have enough base knowledge, you're doing something within similar to a skill set that you've done, right? You know, the computer system. It's like if I were to um, try to teach someone how to do a Google Doc, but they've never turned a computer on, that's a whole different learning environment than you had a manager doing a process for the last 5 years. And as an owner, you need to learn those processes really quickly. Well, you're the owner. You understand the point of sale system. You have enough base knowledge that you're ahead of the game, but you do not know the details. So uh, it's kind of like looking at it in steps. Probably the first one is, what's the end goal? And this also is a very, very good way to eliminate steps is, okay, person that orders our products every day leaves the business. And tomorrow we have to do orders. Question then becomes not necessarily how do we do the orders, but the question might best be stated as, what are the ideal orders that we send to our vendors? Or how do we receive the proper products from the proper vendors, right? We want to kind of look at an outcome based primary question, because this does two things. One, it gives us a point to drive toward, uh, but it also allows us to rebuild a process that has a clear and well stated objective outcome So that means it matters less how we get there. If we want to follow a step-by-step process that we don't own, we start at the beginning and we just do step, 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 step blindly. But if we shoot for a well-stated outcome, the steps themselves won't matter as much. They might be the same steps, in all honesty, but it allows us to more likely be able to skip steps because all we want is the outcome. And the best way that we can get to an outcome that's going to be consistent and accurate, do as few steps as possible. So with the key man risk, if again, this is a pain point, so this is something that has to be resolved relatively quickly. But that's what I would do is key man leaves, try to be objective, sit down and say, what are the most critical tasks in this person's week that they accomplished? Take all of those tasks, try to write objective, clear outcomes. They were doing their job great and their outcomes were great. Just kind of like use that. Okay. They order the product, product lands on the loading dock and we receive it. So we need these 5 vendors ordered weekly and we need the products to be accurate and timely. Okay. That's your objective outcome. Maybe they did deposits. I don't know. So what is it? Properly counted, prepared to go to the bank. And we just kind of go through their task list, just the ideal objective outcome. Once we have those stated clearly, we have a direction that we can drive toward without a prescribed, if we want to do a deposit, we might say, well, let me start with the cash that's in the safe. And then, let me figure out which bank it has to be good. Then I have to figure out how this bank takes their deposits and what paperwork they need. And then, go to the bank and whatever. And again, you're both going the same way. It's just when you start with the objective outcome, you now have the flexibility to recreate a functional system that is not dependent on all of the previous steps. That's the way I would look at it is outcomes, well-articulated outcomes are probably your best starting point for rebuilding processes if a key man were to leave.
I think of were we about to jump into the warehouse process, the objective outcome was to get the inventory received accurately, released in a timely manner, and on the sales floor as fast as possible so that we could sell it, especially since we run a very lean inventory in our store. So I like that a lot, objective outcomes. I think it's going to lead pretty much how we got to the end of how our warehouse now operates. So we are going to jump into how all of this kind of functions in real time with our warehouse and how we improved it. But I want to point out when we talked about noticing some of those pain points earlier, our warehouse had that key man risk. There was really only one person that did it somewhat mainly accurately and efficiently. So if he was out, the whole process slowed down significantly with somebody having to learn it, pretty much relearn it that day. It was a process that had errors in it and that it took a very long time to investigate the errors because we didn't have something in place to look back on. If then somebody else stepped in, it was going to be inconsistent depending on who did it. It was a process that created problems other areas, like I said, the retail side of things. And when we talk about the outside key factors, like this all got evaluated around COVID timeframe, we were having problems getting product on the floor so that our shoppers could shop as quickly as possible just because it was taking so long to do that. So we had all of these pain points, all of these different things that we just went unnoticed, not necessarily unnoticed, went unchecked just because there was no strain on the business. And then COVID hits. So they walk us through what our warehouse receiving process looked like before we evaluated it and what did it actually cost us in time, money, and operational drag.
So you already mentioned it, but this is an area that we had one guy taking care of it. So there was key man risk, but also did the job well enough that I never really questioned the process, right? Just set it and forget it. Things are getting done. Happy enough with the way things are, focus on other areas of the business. But uh, it was generally an individual's full-time job, so roughly 40 hours a week, and took care of everything from the time the product landed on the dock, scanning it in, helping to bring it out to the floor. He would do credit communications, returning damaged products. But when they were done, so a lot of it was done very manually. And so if there's a product that came in damaged, communication would be essentially write it up on the vendor's paperwork, tear the UPC off, scan that, email that to the vendor. That didn't always happen that day because there were other things to be received and done. So that gets put on a desk. And, there's always a window of time that we should be communicating with vendors. So sometimes those get overlooked. Other credit returns from customer returns that had to go back to vendors. That was another thing that was always like a back burner. So those were not always prioritized. The priority was product in through the warehouse, checked in, out to the floor. But it was slow, tedious. Quite a bit of it was manual. And, while someone else could do the job, it was just not well recorded, not well documented. So someone else doing the job would always be like relearning it because they didn't do it that often. So that's really, so it really took 40 hours, and that included primarily scanning, receiving, sometimes double counting if things didn't match, and then all of the other sort of administrative paperwork stuff, communicating with vendors about credits and returns and damage and missed products. But those were secondary to receiving. So those could be piled on a desk and forgotten. And then even if the communication did occur, we didn't have a system for tracking credits, right? So like you tell the vendor that there was a damaged product and they agree that they'll take care of it, but we didn't really know when or if we were going to get that credit. And there was no way to sort of like, there was a way, but it was very slow and manual to back check. Here's the paperwork that I sent them for the product that was damaged. Here's the credit that came. Now we match these literally two pieces of paper together. We're like, oh yeah, this is what this was. Okay, put that away. So the word that mostly comes to mind is manual. Everything was manual. Everything was touched 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And that just painfully slow.
And like we're talking about, we didn't have any stressors on our business at the time that were causing this hose to leak. It was just functioning. Water was flowing, product was flowing through the sales floor, nothing really to cause any leakage until, unfortunately, to bring this stressful business story up for you, is COVID happened and we shut our doors, and you're literally having your every employee pick orders for people and products not on the shelf where it needs to be because it's getting hung up in that slower process. So what's the first thing you identified as the biggest bottleneck in this process?
So yeah, there was so much going on at one time. I think what I noticed first was mentally, I knew we had products or were expecting product, but it wasn't available to be picked. So there was like a massive gap of time between expectation and ground truth, the reality, right? So essentially, Phillips is coming in today, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever day Phillips is coming in. We need a product that was going to come in on Phillips because we ran low and it's not on the shelf. Customer wants it. Oh, well, it's not just this. Oh, now it's this product from PFX. Like, what's going on here? Why am I expecting that we should have these products available for customers, for our employees to pick and send out the door to sell? But I'm not seeing them. They're not where they should be. They're not on the shelf. We can't pick them. Or it's like you run back to the warehouse because there's a pallet sitting there and you're like, tell the receiver, I'm going to steal this product from your pallet, right? I'm going to leave you a note because I need this bag of from right now. And I'm going to steal it from your pallet. Just remember with my note to check it in that it was received. And so I saw this kind of like over and over and over again. So basically it was one of the largest pain points was simply my expectation of product availability was not matching the reality on the ground. Uh, and I think that was the thing where like, I'm trying to run everything at once and the front end of phone calls and receiving and coordinating, picking orders and getting them out to customers and receiving payment for those over the phone and just like whirlwind of everything going on. And I'm like, I can't sell the stuff. I don't have it available to pick. So I think that was kind of the thing that was my personal largest pain point that forced me to stop, take a step back, be that objective, and sit down with our receiver and it's like literally looking over his shoulder. How exactly do we do this? Show me the step by step. And that's where it started for warehouse improvement.
And even though I know we would never want another COVID thing to happen, I mean, it was somewhat of a blessing because it does shines a light on certain things so that you can improve these things in your business. Because how many customers came in before COVID and probably just didn't see the product on the shelf, didn't buy it because of that reason, but it might have been sitting in the warehouse or they just didn't think to ask, hey, do you have this in the back or something like that? So we can't quantify those missed sales beforehand that we just didn't know were happening. So again, don't ever want anything like that to happen again, but taking advantage of these outside factors, whether it's COVID or increased business on your end, or you lose that key man, trying to have a positive outlook about, okay, we're going to improve this now so that it works better and that we can delegate it better.
And I think another one of those soft costs that has the compounding effect is, okay, we don't have, pain that's stabbing us in the back saying you have to do this now. But when we refine these systems, like if we think of the people that we want to benefit most by being in business, our customers, and we want to make it easy on our employees. And we've talked about this as well in the past, Tip, is like our job is to make the environment best for our customers, employees, our best customers and our best employees. But we also want to make it easy on our vendors, in order to be a sustainable, profitable business over time. If we can improve our business so that it's just easy for everyone to interact with, easy for our customers, easy for our employees, easy for our vendors, we're going to build better relationships and we're going to have a much more durable and sustainable business over time. And so part of the compounding effect that we see with this exact use case is the strain on our employees caused by products not being where we expect them. We can't pick them easily. We have to communicate back to the customer that we have to wait, hang on a minute. Let me check this, not sure. So all of these sort of like, we're actually creating stress for our employees by not having these things done as well as they could be done. And I think that's sort of like, I felt the pain personally, so I felt compelled to fix it for very selfish reasons. But the positive compounding effect is just that, is like made it easier on our customers, made it easier on our employees, made the whole process simpler. And then on the business side, it made costs go down, it made processes easier, made it easier on our vendors. So like all of these other things spawned out of this huge pain point. And like you're saying, is we don't want another COVID, but realize it's not just, there's still pain going on. It's just not as obvious.
So let's walk through your steps real quick on like some of the things you might have changed. We'll go high view with it just because everybody's receiving process is going to be very different. Some people might not have warehouses. Some people might be checking things in on the floor. Step one of your framework, what are we doing today that we no longer need to do? It sounds like you engaged with them, walk me through the entire process and started picking and pulling some things that you're like, we don't need to do this, we don't need to do that.
Yeah. So one of the areas that had a really high ROI was if I could improve accuracy on scanning, I could reduce all of the follow on effects of a potential miscount, right? So the miscount check process was huge, right? So if the invoice didn't match our physical scan, then they would have to manually go back and recount, and nothing left the warehouse until it was 100% checked. And this was one of my biggest sort of like pain points, because I wanted speed and receiver was focusing on accuracy, which is good, but accuracy was damaged because of a bad scanning process. So improve scanning process, increase speed and accuracy, reduce error, and back check. All of that went away when we improved how do we take the inbound product and have a high level of confidence that things are scanned well. And in the rare case that our count and invoice and PO don't really match, what is a faster, easier way to run confirmation, to back check those counts? So that was the biggest thing that increased. So basically what I said was, I want to delete your second check, and I want the product to be available to the floor as soon as you scan it one time. And then I said, we'll figure out how to check it, whether it was accurate or not, later. So that was kind of step one. Step two was improve the scanning process itself. We improved, like I said, the scanner for speed and a more systematic approach to the check-in process that reduced error, increased speed, reduced the need for back checking later. So that in and of itself, that was not all we did, but that in and of itself solved almost all the problems and increased our accuracy and speed for receiving immensely. It was the biggest ROI that we had.
And I've told a couple stores about like how much you approximately spent on either new scanners, a whole new computer to basically make sure that it's as efficient as possible. And they're like, I don't know if I want to eat the that kind of dollar amount, which I don't know exactly what off the top of my head all ended up to be. But some of these scanners are not cheap. But it pays off in the end. We were dealing with a scanner that you'd scan a product and ask you two questions in between being able to scan another product. So you have to hit okay to clear to go to the next one instead of just being able to go scan, 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 scan. And then we have our big bag scanner, which is more of a handheld right at the point of the stacking or the pallet. And then we have like what we call our pick pack scanner, which looks more like a grocery store. Well, it is a grocery store scanner. That whole process looks like when you check out at the grocery store. It's very efficient. You bring the box over, you're literally going scan and putting it into individualized bins, which is also a whole nother step that makes somebody else's job easier down the road. So when our retail staff stocks it, they don't have to worry about picking through cat or dog or food or not food. They can literally just take one bin that's already been separated and take it to its specific spot. So like there's just ways to improve it. If you spend the money up front in the streamline and optimize phase, you will see the ROI in the back end.
I see the dollars spent the same as time spent, right? What we were joking about earlier about I'll spend 2 hours to save 15 minutes is, well, 15 minutes is money, right? So shouldn't I spend $2,500 to save half an hour? Like, it's not exactly equivalent. Of course, it's not equivalent, but we can just math that out. Like, okay, what's half an hour cost you? Maybe you're paying somebody $15 an hour. That's $7.50. How many half an hours? Well, we received 10 weekly vendors. Okay. So that's 5 half an hours. that's 5 times 7. That's 750. So that's 40 some dollars. Like, oh, okay. Sure. It might take you 6 months or maybe even a year to pay that off, but it's not just the money, right? It's the simplicity. It's the reduction of error. It's like all of these things have, multiple compounding effects. So if you're on the fence about, gosh, that seems expensive, I'm not sure if I could do it. Well, you don't have to do it the way that we did it. But the point is that you could spend a couple $100 and test it. And then at a couple $100, you're going to pay it off in, just a handful of weeks, or if even a whole week, depending on your business. And like, oh, wow, that's just so much easier. It's such a relief. Oh, and by the way, we get real ROI on the dollars spent as well. So, yeah, I exactly where you were heading there, Tiff, is like, it wasn't just simplification on scanning. It was the way we do it, the grocery scanner, the sorting of pick and pack for the next step. And that's always how I think, is like, what's happening before we got here and what's happening after we got here. The drivers dropped the pallet on the loading dock. How do we make sure it's as easy as possible for them? We wheeled into the warehouse. How do we organize our pallets in such a way that they make sense for the receiver? The receiver has to touch it to scan it. What do they do after it? So not only did we use those bins, we made our little baby pallets, right? So like, instead of picking up a bag and scanning it and then putting it on another pallet or putting it on the floor where someone else has to pick it up again and move it to the retail store, we just had these bag size plywood pallets that a two-wheel dolly truck can slide into. And now it's only touched once and puts down. It doesn't have to be picked up in the warehouse. And it's something as simple as that. Called a 4x8 sheet of 3/4 plywood, made 12 of those. So for $100, I have 12 baby pallets that save our employees back and save time. And it just gets out on the floor that much faster. Simple fix, lots of benefit. And those have already lasted probably 4 years, and they'll last another 4, 5, 6 years.
I'm making those things last 88 more years.
That's right.
Those things are awesome. And if you're worried about your employees, if you're adding these new technologies, these new scanners, new spreadsheets, I think people don't like change when it comes to things that make their life more complicated, or they don't understand. They do like change if you're making their lives easier. Everything we change in the warehouse, and we're still improving this process to this day, I almost see an immediate just kind of sigh of relief when they use it for the first time and they're like, oh, this is just so much easier. I appreciate it. They're not averse to change. They're willing to. They just have to understand it, and it has to actually make sense that it's improving their work efficiency or whatever. Because you can make a bunch of changes that makes their life that much harder, and they're not going to like it, and they're going to be very resistant to all those, rightfully so, which can also be a tall tale sign that you're not making the right changes. But
That's a good point. It's right. Yeah. Go to an employee, say, oh, I want you to do these 3 more things. Or go to an employee and say, I took these 3 steps and made it into 1 step. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Do that again, please. Like,
yeah.
make my life easier.
In the case of the baby pallets, it's like the warehouse guy, like you said, stuck it on the floor and stacked maybe 10 bags of, 25 to 35 pound bags of food. And then an employee had to come and restack that onto the dolly. And that means that 2 people had to physically lift it. And that's just physical stress. You put that baby pallet under there and the warehouse just puts it onto that. There's no more lifting on the second thing. So it's not just the time, it's just like the physical strain and everything.
It's funny too, right? Because we got the one vendor hooked, so that we have one vendor that doesn't bring in palletized stuff. And he's always walks in the warehouse like, hey, can I get 2 baby pallets? And brings it back out to the truck, and he loads the stuff on those, and we don't have to lift it again.
Say who that is. That's Hill's Science Diet. We should sell them those food fresh. Definitely.
That's right.
They got the money for it.
They could buy it. We should just sell them. Like, if it cost us $10 for a baby pallet, charge them.
So we removed steps from the warehouse process. We streamlined, optimized with some technologies, and basically streamline what steps are left. And then we kind of turned up the heat. We sped it up as fast as we could, and we found some more breaking points. What were some of the breaking points that we had found?
It's sort of our speed up step. And talk specifically about the desktop scanner, which is a blessing. Like, I don't know dollar wise, what's the difference between our pick pack and our large bags or unit wise. Um, but we do a lot of pick pack. And as Tiff explained, we have our desktop scanner, which is waist height by design, inbound product on the right, outbound bins that go to the floor on the left. And it's literally product scan drop, product scan drop. And it's extremely efficient. If you think about, a grocery store employee that had too much coffee or something, you can just literally run it over the scanner, run it over the scanner, run it over the scanner. And initially, when we set it up, we partnered with our point of sale person. We used a little bit of a different piece of receiving software that we hadn't used before. And it was slightly different than our common process, but 10 times better in a lot of ways, because it had some nice visual cues. And it was just super easy to use, especially combined with the scanner. And there were some errors that speed caused. Essentially, our old system would flag special order products with a distinct noise. So receiver would know right away, set this product aside. And errors in scan would be flagged differently as well. So we were going fast enough that if the scanner would make an affirmative beep, I scanned the UPC code, but our receive system, if it wasn't a UPC that was in alignment there, we didn't get a unique, distinct sound to say, oh, slow down, you got something wrong here. We didn't have a distinct sound for set this product aside. It's been allocated to a customer. So we were creating some problems that didn't exist before. So we just had to loop back and modify our system so we broke it, but we didn't break it bad. We actually broke it and made it way, way better. Because in the conversation of improving, we were able to get audible signals. I actually put little speakers up over the receiving station. So even if there's background noise or other stuff going on, now there's distinct audible cues that tell the receiver, pay attention. And it'll flag our allocated products for special order. It'll flag for error where this product's UPC scans properly, but is not properly received in our point of sale system. So once we worked through some of the early sort of like pain points of change, so now we have speed and we have accuracy and we have notifications when when errors occur, and all of these things compounded to make it, to your point, when we go to our receivers and say, oh, by the way, we made a change, you will now know when these things happen. And they're like, oh, this is wonderful. So much easier. So that's a really good example of speeding things up. Being okay with breaking a system, knowing that we can just move down that path to improvement, break it and find out what we have to do to fix it. Now we're better off, more accuracy, more speed, more efficiency overall. And I'm still amazed when I watch the process getting done, because, it's delightful to watch. It's like, this is so good.
Yeah.
And to your point, we're never done improving. So we're always looking at different parts of the system that we can tweak or change. Where's the return on investment? How can we improve these things? Or where are the things still broken that are difficult for somebody, for our receiver, or for the vendor, whatever. So, but that was a really incredible process that we were able to tackle broke more stuff, created more problems, fixed them, and now the whole system is, like I said, really incredible and easy for our receivers and wonderful for accuracy. So I love this example just because it ticks all of the boxes.
And then the final step with automation, you mentioned at the beginning, one of the big pain points was the double check, was to make sure that it was scanned properly and done correctly. And we couldn't afford to have that second check in place before the product went on the floor. So one of the biggest things that sounds like you automated was what we call the missing extra report.
I play a lot with the Google Docs system, right? Google Docs, Google Spreadsheets. And with our point of sale system, we were able to get certain types of reports to kick out in compatible with Google Sheets, a tab separated file, and it just opens right in Google Sheets very easily. So what our point of sale system does is it sends out what's called a missing extra report. And that is simply the physical scan that happened in the warehouse. What does not match the PO that we created and sent to the vendor? So the point of sale system knows what the PO is, and the point of sale system knows what we said we received, and it sends the discrepancies. And the discrepancies will say, we ordered 3, we received 0, there's 3 missing. We ordered 2 and we received 4, we have 2 extra. And this whole report is given to the receiver as soon as they're finished doing the physical scan. They run the report in our point of sale, and then they kick it out to this Google Sheet. There's 2 steps that occur at that point. One is confirm against vendor invoice whether or not they shipped and billed against our new missing extra report. So they'll go through the missing extra. Suppose there's 25 lines of discrepancies. Most of those are not shipped. Change a product item, number, or back ordered, or discontinued, or various reasons that they didn't send it out of stock. And we'll literally go through 0 received, unbilled, out of stock, 0 received, unbilled, discontinued product, line by line by line, 25 lines, which we are working on improving. And we'll get there probably in the next month. But this process goes through, we check off 20 of the 25 lines. In theory, we have 5 lines left that expose discrepancies that are not accounted for on the invoice. So now what we do is we have a tablet where you can walk the floor, because nothing's in the warehouse anymore. By the time we go through this, all the product's been out to the sales floor. And we can compare what our inventory says we should have, that is what we had and what we're receiving. And we can compare that number to what is physically counted right there to confirm we physically miscounted. There was an error in the store, or the likelihood is that the vendor had sent something wrong. And that shouldn't take, it should take less than 10 minutes. You go through the store and you reconfirm your 5 or 6 or 2 products that were on the missing extra, not confirmed on the invoice. And we compare these to physical inventory count against expected inventory. And then the final step is clearing the last couple of lines. If we have to, press a button that creates an email draft that we immediately confirm the email draft is accurate, send that to the vendor that says, these are the things that you invoiced us for, but we did not receive. These are the things that you sent too many of, and we are going to, keep it and pay you for it, or we're not going to keep it. Please send an RGA so that we can send it back to you. So that's basically the whole process. And that last confirm step We do use it. We have to use it because nothing's ever 100%, but it's very easy. Like I said, we walk the floor with the tablet, do inventory count confirmations, check the box, accurate, not accurate, and then send the final report to the vendor. And all of that is done 20 minutes after everything's received. I mean, it's incredible. A $5,000 to $7,000 mixed food and pick pack pallet can be checked in, confirmed, and sent back to the vendor in an hour and a half to 2 hours, and done. Don't have to worry about it. That information goes up to sort of admin, and then we have a credit list, and that credit list lives in a Google Sheet. And these are the expected credits that we should be keeping an eye out for in the next couple of days. One of the other things, like I said, I'm so sort of delighted and surprised by the process that I enjoy just watching it because it's so neat to me, is like this. The other thing that is amazing to me is pallet lands. We touch the first bag within 2 hours on a fairly sized order. We have already counted and sent communication back to the vendor. Typically within the hour, the vendor has responded to us that says, we got your note, checking into it. They're not promising a credit or anything. They're just saying, we received your communication and we will confirm later. And then often the credit follows within 24 to 48 hours. I'm so pleased by the whole thing that it amazes me how refined it's become and how easy it's become.
Just to give people a perspective of how painful this step was beforehand, is you would have an invoice or PO of 200-ish lines, maybe more. And the warehouse person had to go through line by line and have the invoice next to it and literally just say, yes, we got that. Yes, 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 yes. And I think he had like a ruler that kind of helped him keep the line straight. And it was just such a painful process, but we didn't know it was painful at the time because we thought it was the only way to do it until he built this missing extra Google Sheet that just automated this entire process. So now instead of looking at 200 lines, it whittles it down to maybe 10 to 20 lines that somebody just has to go and investigate really quickly and pop back and forth between the invoice with a lot less chance of error. When you're looking at 200 lines, the chances of you saying, oh, we ended up getting it and we actually didn't, or vice versa, was just such a higher risk. And now that we're looking at 10 to 20 lines, and half the time it's just out of stock. So it's easy to say, yes, they didn't send it. 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 It just becomes way more of an efficient process. So that time is just cut way more than half, but definitely down. And then the next phase of this project, which Dave alluded to, is that we'll hopefully have done in the next month, is taking the human side out of this, of the line checking, and having AI do it for us, or at least a software built with AI that can take the invoice, take our missing extra report, and just marry them on top of each other and rule out the ones we don't need to check. Because if it can look at the zeros on the PO and the zeros on the invoice, there's no reason a human needs to look over that again. That should be relatively quick information. So if it can cut it down to maybe 2 or 3 lines where it's like, hey, there might be a human error in scanning here, and we can just efficiently go back and look through that. The goal is to basically keep removing bits of data that we have to review as a human, because that's when we start messing up, is when we interject ourselves in data validation. And the beauty of this little document also, and he said it, like, if we put discontinued on a product, it goes to our purchaser so that they can make adjustments, either change the product itself or change how we're going to order a similar product. He can instantly make decisions based off that information. It's right in front of him. Or if a product changes their UPC, they change the size and we need to supersede that item, he has all that information at his fingertips. And then the other part of it is going to our admin staff, our bookkeeper, to look out for credit and debit statements to know that we've actually got the product. If they send an overage and we need to send it back, or like he's saying, the shortages, to validate those credits, because those were just getting dropped in an inbox. And it was very hard. You either had to call the distributor to verify that they had actually credited us, because it was just getting in an inbox that was convoluted. But now it's as simple as checking a box like, yes, we got this credit, this one, this one, this one, this one, to make sure that our books are nice and clean, and cut down on the communication between We don't need to waste a customer service rep's time at a distributor if we can just validate it with the information they've already sent us. And the nice thing is they also, since we are sending it within a couple hours, I've seen a credit come through by the end of the day. Like it's getting a little bit slower, like within 24 hours, but I've seen it happen that fast. They're like, yep, that's good. Sorry about that. Here's the credit. And we can just already scratch that off our books as being square. So there's just so many different things in this one automation that's improved our purchasing, that's improved the receiving time, it's improved or our admins.
We talked briefly about sort of spending time of investment or money investment and what's the return on investment of that time or money. I calculated about $24,000 of annual vendor discrepancy adjustments. So when you look at like real numbers, when you look at if you are not addressing these discrepancies at receiving, your compounding effects are multiple. So your potential dollars variation, your missed credits, and that's net. We always pay for products that we received, but we're not invoiced. We either send them back if we don't want them, if they don't fit our inventory model, or we ask them to charge us on a new invoice. So the $24,000 is net of what we're paying for products that were shipped and not asked for, and products that were either received damaged or invoiced but not shipped. That's 24,000 real dollars. Yeah, I'm not saying anybody is not getting those, but this system is both accurate and fast. So that $24,000 is in our normal cash flow. It's not being taken out to pay for products we're not receiving. It's real time getting back. Like some companies will actually just adjust the invoice. They won't charge us the invoice and then credit us. They'll immediately adjust the invoice and only charge us for the products that are in the very, that were expected. So like, if you think about spending time and money on these systems, there's very real dollar value, not to mention the compounding effect of inventory accuracy and customer service, ease on the employees, and all of these other things that are both easy to measure and hard to measure. I just want to throw that out there because I was kind of surprised at the dollar value of the discrepancies over a running 12-month period.
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't know it was that much. That's great.
Yeah.
So after we've walked this entire framework, we now have a front staff that's completely trainable. It's an easy process to learn. It no longer requires a dedicated person that has the knowledge in their head. We've cut a 40-hour work week to essentially about a 10-hour work week with the improvements in scanning and accuracy and checking the products on the sales floor within probably an hour or two of which it's dropped on our dock instead of having it on the sales floor kind of next day by the latest. I think the main thing is the change was not working harder or faster. It was removing the unnecessary steps and redistributing the work correctly. So I think that's huge. The warehouse receiving improvement did not just save time. It recovered cash, reduced errors, improved vendor relationships, and freed up a full-time employee to contribute elsewhere in the store. One process evaluation had a ripple effect across our entire operations between purchasing and receiving and inventory and the admin staff. So how can we apply this to anybody's store? It doesn't have to be your warehouse that needs or your receiving process that needs it. It could be any process within your business. If a store owner is sitting here thinking about their own business right now, how do they decide which process to tackle first? What's the prioritization criteria for you, Dave?
Yeah, I would just run down a sort of a mental checklist as you look at your day and you look at your operation. Where are you spending the most time? Like we talked about, what's the most consistent process that is you're just doing over and over and over again? These are the things that can be looked at first. You know, where are your errors? Where you're spending time trying to discover the errors and fix the problems. And I think you mentioned earlier, Tiff, is like, don't fix the symptom. Don't fix like the problem itself. Look upstream for the root cause. What's causing the problem? this is an area that you should be able to focus on and get a good ROI out of. Um, or look downstream when a problem occurs. What are the compounding follow-on effects that affects your employees, it affects the customers and the customer service? So, we look upstream, we look downstream, and those types of problems that have that compounding effect is very, very valuable to look at. Um, Key person risk, owner manager risk, anything that is predominantly driven by one person with that proprietary knowledge. This is a type of system that you want to spend time improving, testing, trying to delegate, refining. Like we said, our warehouse receiving process, I never expect anything to be perfect on the first run. So, understand that this is not a one and done, not something that you do and forget about. This is something that you build once and you iterate on until you get to a point where you've cultivated the ROI, the system's working well, you're happy with the outcome and results that you had outlined originally. And then you move on to the next most important ROI, the next most important compounding effect and customer service effect. So where you look at your priority is where you're spending the most time and either direct cost or indirect cost, uh, or risk, right? Those three areas is time, money, or risk are your primary areas of focus that you really want to tackle first. If you're new to this, if you haven't created the SOPs, if you haven't created in-depth processes, you might start with a simple project that will take you just a few days to kind of like understand from the beginning to end, creating the objective, having you teach someone the process, putting it down in paper, and then running a few iterations. So you don't have to go high threshold first, but high threshold is where you're going to get your money back. Low threshold, low risk means you can play with it. And if you mess it up, you're not too worried about it. So decide where you are mentally, what you want to tackle first. But, either low threshold to get your wheels moving, to get your process thinking hat on and going that way, or high threshold, high risk, high cost, high time sink. Those are your real money savers and energy savers.
Yeah. I was talking with a store a couple weeks back and they were discussing their ordering process, their weekly orders, and said it was an 8-hour day to process the week's orders. We kind of worked through like, why does it take that long? All the different things. Well, inventory is usually off. So I have to go physically look at it in order to order it or something like that. So like these were symptoms that they could feel the inventory being off or whatever the case is. But they were looking at it as like, it just takes that long to order. Like it shouldn't take that long to order. It's 2026. There's a lot of amazing POS systems out there that can help you order more efficiently, order accurately, or if they can't, you can build a process through like Google Sheets or a spreadsheet easily with AI these days. Our order process, I think Dave mentioned we order about 10 vendors a week, takes about 2 hours. And there's no manual checking really of anything. It's kind of an automated system. It's just making sure and verifying that our customer special orders get ordered or moving maybe a couple products that haven't been showing up from distributors to another distributor to try and increase our chances of getting that product. It does, again, it's things that you think might be normal within your business might not be normal. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to create this group is that we could collaborate and you can ask a different story like, hey, how long does it take you to do this kind of thing? You're similar. You use the same POS system as I do. And does that actually work for you guys? Just to collaborate and meet other people and find out, oh, maybe they solved that problem of how fast to order with this type of POS system or know what scanner to buy for your warehouse to make it more efficient. That's exactly what NPR is about. But jumping back, Dave, what is the most common mistake you see when someone tries to improve a process? Where do people go wrong before they even start making changes?
When we're so close to it, that there's a saying that you can't read the label from inside the bottle. If you're inside a system, if you built it or you spend every day working in it, it's very, very difficult to come outside and be objective. So it's also like when we're dealing with customers and they start to say, oh, I need this for itchy skin. And you're already 3 solutions ahead. And you're like, oh, what you need is this. Good customer service. We should listen. We should ask questions. We should distill the problem, make sure they feel heard, even if we give them the same end result. But what we're doing here too is like, we might think we know the correct answer without having really dug deep in the problem. If we do that, we're going to end up with the same system that we had before, right? So open our minds, be objective. We don't know yet possible solutions that are out there. So it's a matter of discovery and inquiry and testing and playing and just trying to do things that we haven't done before to come up with a potentially way better solution. So I think that's a big problem, is thinking we know the answer. And if we operate from that model, we're going to build a system that's almost identical to the system we already have. Another big problem we talked about before is it's optimizing parts that we really should have gotten rid of. Like, do we need that step anymore? It happened when we had a different point of sale system. It was used to fix this one problem that happened one time that we haven't ever seen again. We're fixing things that we don't need to fix. It's got a little bit crude, but it's like polishing a turd, right? It's like it has no positive impact and doesn't really benefit anybody. If we're changing things, there's 2 sides to like a start from scratch methodology. If we have a fairly well-refined system that we're happy with, we've gone to the end, looked for the objective outcome that we want. It might be just a matter of improving one step at a time, because if we try to improve too much and something breaks, it could take us a lot longer to get the system back on track. So we don't want to change too many variables at once, or actually multiple variables at once. We want to make sure that we build a system simply. I'll counter that just really to that key man risk, or if we have an urgency where we have to fix something. Sometimes a start from scratch model where we're literally building everything at once can work, but it will be more difficult, right? Because when we build a brand new system completely from end to end, if things don't go exactly as expected, we have to go through each step and figure out where the steps are broken down. So better to keep things simple, change one variable at a time, versus just throwing the whole thing out and starting over. Both are valid. Just know where you're at and which way you want to go. If you don't have to rebuild a whole system, change one variable at a time. So we talked about like the benefit of the novice, the inexperienced person having an outside view, but we don't want to update by committee. So if we have 10 people sitting around a table and we come up with like 5 ideas, we're like, oh, this is great. It's probably not, right? The person who's going to be the project manager that's going to take full ownership ultimately has to make the decision. And just like only changing one variable at a time, we should only have one decision maker at a time. So we just want to drive from a very clear point of view without a whole lot of distraction, without a whole lot of variable inputs. It's okay in a brainstorming session to have ideas. It always has to be distilled to a very clear path. And then, another error that we see is, and you talked about repeatedly today, Tip, is trying to fix a temporary solution that doesn't really fix what's going on. We want to look upstream, look for the root cause. And if we fix that once and we fix it well, it solves what we talked about, all those compounding follow-on effects. And you had just mentioned about like, using a point of sale where in the way that we do, with allowing the point of sale to do the orders for us, because we've developed all of the systems to maintain our inventory with a sufficient accuracy. And I say it that way because we know we can't have it 100% accurate, that we can trust it most of the time. We can trust our point of sale to run orders automatically because we manage our inventory in such a way that we can trust it. And this is what makes the whole thing work and this is the perfect example of an upstream downstream problem is if you are weak on managing, most of what we discussed won't work well. So taking receiving seriously, figuring out ways to spot check your inventory, making sure your front staff is checking customers out properly. All of these things create a reliable inventory that makes everything so much easier. I mean, this is what operates your business. So that's probably one of the biggest things is fixing root causes. And in that example is inventory management and trust. That's the root cause of a lot of carry-on, follow-on effects. And it's so important to the whole business that, that's why it was so important to us to really improve training at front staff and improve receiving and warehouse. Fixes so many problems. I mean, it just really makes everything else operate more smoothly.
I know my biggest mistake is usually optimizing or automating before I do step 1 and 2, before I remove steps that are extraneous or streamlined. Like I just have a hard time being like, okay, here's the problem. And especially now since AI have made things so much easier to build, I'm like, oh, I could just fix this problem with this AI band-aid of some sort. So it's very hard for me to step back this way. I appreciate your perspective and this framework because it can help me slow down, just take out what I don't need to optimize. Because I built things with AI that I'm like, oh, why did I even put this step in there? That was part of the old process. It doesn't need to be part of the new one because this does this now. So it definitely, especially with shiny new technology, can make it a lot harder to not put the band-aid over things because it's going to work. You should just optimize upstream first and then build the processes with the technology. So what I want everybody to do that's listening, I want you to pick one process in your store with the highest time cost or the most errors. You probably already had something in your mind rattling around as we were talking today. Either ask the person who owns it to teach it to you or attempt to do it yourself cold. Write down every step that caused confusion, required a judgment call, or took longer than it should have. Ask for each step, does this need to exist? If yes, can it be simpler? If it can be simpler, who else could do it? Who could we delegate it to? And then change one thing at a time and measure the result before changing the next thing. These 5 steps you can do and then just do a quick, simple process improvement without making huge major changes in your business. You do not find efficiency by working harder inside a broken process. You find it by stepping outside the process long enough to ask you whether it should work the way it does. Thank you so much, Dave, for sharing your perspective. I know that we had to revisit a time of COVID that always makes your hair a little bit whiter or grayer, but thank you for sharing how you improved your store. I know I learned a lot of learning how that framework works for you and how to step outside of situations and see the bigger picture. Next week, we are continuing the operations series with the topic every store owner needs, which is how to reduce your owner dependency. We are talking about how to build a store that runs without you in it so you can step back, work on your business instead of in it, and maybe, just maybe, take a real vacation without your phone blowing up a million times. Thank you guys so much for being here, and we'll see you guys next week.